Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Heroes of the Heart. Our hero of the heart today is Dan Stillman. And Dan is a positive psychology practitioner, a transformational mindset, and integrative medicine health coach who decided to implement his experience and knowledge through his website, holisticwellcare.coach, by teaching life concepts that aren't commonly taught at home, in school, or in the workplace. Welcome to Heroes of the Heart, Dan.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me.
So it's interesting how things, we get taught a lot of things at home, at school, at work. I was just reading an article in the Harvard Business Review just now about 160 different practices that consultants and academians went through to figure out like what really worked. But there's so much that is pushed out there, but still there seems to be something that's missing. What would you say your experiences with regards to that? What are the things that you really care about that might be missing from the workplace, from the schools, from homes?
Well, each of us have unique stories that we were born into, I should say, right? And we're influenced in many different ways through environmental factors, through our parents, how we're raised. And I think, some of the things that are lacking in what we are taught are more how to deal with our minds and how to question our thoughts and how to understand how our brains work. Also how to understand concepts such as growth versus fixed mindset, self-regulation, communication skills. And it goes both ways when it transcends both masculine and feminine energy. Of course, we learn as men, that we shouldn't, express our feelings and we shouldn't communicate. We should be tough. We should be strong. And that's kind of bad, right? That's not really what reality is. And then on the flip side of it, they expect men to get along with women who are more vulnerable, who express their emotions, and then it causes a conflict. So when I say what I really feel needs to, I guess, be spoken about more when either in school or at work or just at home is vulnerability. Because I believe when you become vulnerable, and vulnerability, you're talking about heroes of the heart, where does vulnerability, I think, live? And I believe it lives in your heart.
Sure.
And I think that both transcends both masculine and feminine energy, because when you're truly vulnerable with yourself, then you could be truly vulnerable with others, because you're not letting fear of the unknown, or fear of what other people think about you, or whatever that stigma is, that prevents you from truly being honest and communicate your feelings, your wants, and your needs. And I feel that more people need to not be afraid to do that, but we don't really emphasize or teach that, unfortunately, as much as I feel that we should.
Sure. That's an interesting point, that that there's a call for us to be vulnerable, to share our full selves, but yet we also, both internally and I think socially, culturally, we tend to kind of pull the blinds and shut the doors and the shutters and so forth, in order to keep people from seeing what is really going on inside of us, even though it's that what is going on authentically within us that really helps us to connect with others, and for us to really appreciate where others are coming from. But yet there's this whole stigma, this whole kind of counter movement of being the tough man, and having the right answers, and always being able to push through whatever obstacles we may encounter along the way.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it all comes from, these environmental influences that we have via social media, TV, and then the way that we're raised, the way that we're spoken to when we're kids, right? If our dad or our mom, basically, we're working on a project, for instance, and we're really trying to do a great job, but then our parent comes in and says, "You're doing it all wrong," right? And you keep hearing, "You're doing it all wrong. You're doing it all wrong,"
Mm,
constantly. Then you start to develop this belief, and this goes back to what I was saying about understanding how your brain works, right? Between what your
right.
subconscious, your conscious, your limbic system, fight, flight, and freeze, your prefrontal cortex, how you create habits, right? We're mostly habits, and we don't understand that a habit is consists of three things. It's a cue, it's a routine, and a reward, right?
Mm,
And when we repeat things over and over again, like just if we change our password on our computer from our, we slowly shed that old password, but we remember the new one, and then we have to do it all over again in 90 days. Well, most people don't understand that's the same way that you also reinforce a new habit or create a change, that you want to implement, because that's how our brains work.
mm,
So, it's just a very interesting, how we just become, I guess the saying is, creature of our own habits, unfortunately, and we get stuck because we think that those are the right ways to act, but they may be causing us suffering instead
mm,
of flourishing, and we get used to that because that's the way of life that we've been exposed to and all we know.
sure. I like that analogy of the password, and just kind of how systems change, and where we get used to changing the passwords to on the computer to go onto what different websites or whatever. Um, Change the passwords or the story in our own minds and our own hearts seems to be a little bit more challenging, because we don't have the same. One of the things that's nice about a computer is that it's built on those routines,
Yes.
that it automatically generates and does things according to those routines, and we do too. But there seems to be a little bit more uh, friction, perhaps, that gets in the way there.
Yeah, absolutely. We get stuck in thinking that our way is the right way until it causes so much pain, unfortunately, that we either hit bottom or, get depressed or have anxiety, and we just live our lives in a state of turmoil, instead of, you know, realizing that there's tools that people could use where they could become their own CBT therapists
Mm,
and question their own thoughts in real time and figure out what thinking traps are. Like, what thinking trap is causing me to feel like I'm mind reading, or I'm externalizing, where I'm pointing the finger at you, or I'm personalizing, where I'm beating myself up, or I'm maximizing and minimizing.
mm,
So there's, these concepts or these words that I'm talking to you about are all from positive psychology, principles and things that I've learned via, my training in positive psychology, which most people haven't even heard of positive psychology.
sure.
But really, it's the study of human flourishing.
Mm. So I'm curious as to what got you started on the path to studying those things. Was there a catalyst that began the journey, or was it just curiosity, or what happened?
Um, well, I've always been an introspective person. I had some trauma in my life. I was raised in an alternative lifestyle. My parents got divorced when I was 4, and I was raised by women. And unfortunately, back in 1974, wasn't as accepted as it is now. And, you're going back to what people are afraid of, what other people think, right? So I had
Mm,
some abandonment issues, some family members who didn't like the fact that my mom wanted to be her true self, and they
mm,
abandoned us. So, I had to deal with some abandonment issues, which had to deal with some shame, things that we, like we talked about earlier, the beliefs that we create cause us to have some issues later in life until we break that cycle and realize, wow, that was not the right way of thinking. And also for learning about forgiveness and communicating and investigating why people did the things that they did and healing that trauma. So I was able to go to therapy and to heal the trauma that basically affected me. And therapy is a great thing. I think therapy, psychotherapy, people do have biological issues where they need medication, just like a diabetic needs medication. They don't produce enough insulin. Well, the same thing with somebody who, may have doesn't generate enough neurotransmitters and they have to have that medicine. So, but then again, once you reach a certain point where you heal some of that trauma or whatever issues holding you back, where do you go from there? Right. And this is where positive psychology comes in, because in therapy, they don't teach you like some of the concepts that I mentioned before, like self-regulation, resilience, growth versus fixed mindset, habit, how your mind works, and vitality, how to take care of your body, how your mind, body, and spirit are connected, and just a lot, how to learn to love yourself, and all these various things. So I decided that I wanted to create a course that would help people, who, once they dealt with their trauma, where do they go from there, right? So from my own personal journey, I really believe that there's 3 negative behavioral patterns that affect most people subconsciously, and it causes them to reinforce some of the beliefs that I'm not good enough, what's wrong with me, I did something wrong. Those are just some examples. And those 3 negative behavioral patterns are self-centered fear, which either has 2 polarities, either afraid I'm going to lose what I have, or I'm not going to get what I want or need. And some people are stuck in both. Some people are stuck in one. Some people are stuck in the other, and they pop up anytime. And the second, negative behavioral pattern is unrealistic expectations, right? That we have on ourselves, people, place, and things. And lastly, the third negative behavioral pattern is perfectionism, which we all struggle with, which, we could really beat ourselves up, right? And we place that on other people as well. Some, especially in management, you could be a micromanager because you want perfection. So I created those and I said, well, what would be the antidote for those things, right? For self-centered fear. So I created 3 antidotes that I'm a concoction person. I like to mix things up. So like I said, a self-centered fear, unrealistic expectations, all these things, I didn't make them up. They've been made up before, but I'm a puzzle person. And I say, okay, what do you marry up to make things that will, help, make things better, so to speak. So for self-centered fear, I felt the antidote for that is learning to live in the moment, right? Because if you're either afraid you're going to lose what you have, or you're not going to get what you want or need, where are you not? What place are you not in? You're not learning to live in the moment, right? For unrealistic expectations, when you kind of are just comparing all the time, staring and comparing, what is the antidote? What is the opposite of that? And that's having gratitude. Because when you have gratitude, you're basically, grateful for everything, and you're not so much comparing. In fact, you might even be admiring somebody and grateful that they have the life that they have, right? And then for perfectionism, the opposite of that, or the antidote, is loving yourself, right? Truly learning to love yourself. So, this course that I created called Get Real Deal and Heal, I wanted to create it for people who, needed to take that next step, who wanted to find meaning and purpose in their life, but needed to learn some of these concepts that I don't think, like what you opened up the podcast with, isn't taught in school, business, or at home. And it's nobody's fault. It's just we weren't given the playbook. So I wanted to create a playbook that could, basically help people. And at first, I geared it towards people who were between the ages of 20 and 29, because I felt that when I look back at the course, I felt that if I knew some of these concepts between the ages of 20 and 29 before I turned 30, which I believe are the foundational years where you make the most important decisions, whether you decide, okay, I'm in a relationship, do I want to get married? What career do I want to go in? Where do I want to live? You know, there's a lot of decisions that you make when you turn 30. I think my life would have been a bit different. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten divorced and gotten married, because we tend to follow society's so-called rules. Get a career, get a job, get married. And that's what it is, right? That's what you should do.
Right.
And it's all a myth. And, so I wanted to create something to help people, understand some of these concepts, and also, honestly, to learn to communicate better and not make the same mistakes that I made, basically. So I wanted to give back.
That's
I hope that
excellent.
answered your question.
It does, actually. I mean, and I love the way that you looked at the big challenges that we face, with perfectionism, with fearing losing things or not getting things, and not really being present with where we are and appreciating and approaching life from a place of gratitude. When did all this begin for you? When did the journey and the search for these antidotes and kind of the structure that had been missing, when did that occur in your life, when you began on that journey?
So it started when I was 22, actually. The journey really began when I was 22. That's when I so-called hit my bottom. I went to school for computer repair and robotics. I'm in IT. I've been in IT for over 27 years. And back then I was lost. I went into the Air Force to continue my education. And unfortunately, little did I know, we talk about geographical cures to kind of get away from the thing. Like I always felt like there was something wrong with me, like I consider myself a highly sensitive person, maybe empathic too, in that way. And I had a lot of hardship dealing with some of these things that I had to deal with, not feeling like the love, the shame that I discussed earlier from the abandonment issues and things like that. So unfortunately, in the Air Force, they let me go because of some entry level separation. They said I had asthma. I don't know why they didn't test me before I went in, but I was in basic training for 3 weeks and then they sent me home. But at that particular time, that's when I hit bottom. And I said to myself, I need to do something with my life. Like I need to do something, because I was starting to drink alcohol and I was, not taking care of myself. And I've always been into working out. Like that was the one thing I think that kept me sane, was the fact that I always lifted weights and worked out from the time I was like 13. But at this particular time, I was just like, I need to go somewhere. And little did I know that it wasn't the Air Force I needed to go to. It was AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. So, and I didn't even know that, I didn't even realize I wasn't an alcoholic. Like I just needed to get help. So I knew somebody who was in AA and I went to a meeting, and for 4 years, from 1992 to 1996, I followed the program while I went to therapy, Jewish Family Services. And that's how the journey began, and slowly, when at 23, I wrote these things called the 9 ingredients of love. What love meant for me, which are sincerity, courtesy, unselfishness, patience, tolerance, humility, good temper, generosity, and being guileless. And I hung them on my refrigerator, right? And I read them morning and night while following the program. Slowly but surely, I learned to love myself. Like I moved the concept of love from my head to my heart, right? Heroes of the heart. And that's where my journey began. And, after 1996, I realized I wasn't an alcoholic. And, obviously life has always been learning lessons. Got into a relationship, got married, got divorced. That was a learning lesson. Parents passed away. That was a learning lesson. Another relationship where I learned how to communicate properly, not be a people pleaser. accept a strong woman into my life, not feel, I was able to break down the walls of, I don't want to call it toxic masculinity. Let's call it uneducated masculinity. I don't
Mm,
like the word toxic because I think that's a wrong concept. I just think
sure.
that we just don't get the playbook, like I said, we say, okay, hey guys, this is what you have to do. Open up doors for women and do these things. But they don't teach you how to communicate and express your feelings. So I was able to do that. But back in 2018, fast forward, I was let go of my job after 11 years. I'm 48 years old at the time, and I said, "Dan, what do you?" And I started yoga and meditation. That was kind of the last piece that I really needed to help me on my journey to, learn how to breathe properly, how to deal with my anxiety. And when I was let go of my job, I said, "Dan, what are you doing with your life? What is the meaning and purpose for your life?" And that's when this all came to head, where I said, "This is what I want to do." I basically created a brand called Yomenga, right? Which is Yomenga exclusive care for the everyday man. And it's morphed into something more now. Now, where I'm representing on here as holistic wellcare.coach. But I wanted to get the certifications, from positive psychology, integrative medicine, transformational mindset. And I'm also a yoga instructor to create this brand and these services that I wanted to put into a one-stop shop for men so they could get their emotional, physical needs met all under one roof.
Mm,
And through that, though, it started off small, but now it's big. I created this course called Get Real, Deal, and Heal. And I needed more meat for the course. And I said, what would be good for this course? And I'm a spiritual person, and I believe in the universe. I like to call it the divine matrix.
mm,
And I feel for me that when you sit and you meditate, through my training, the answers are given to you.
mm.
And I felt that I was guided to positive psychology. I looked it up online. I was like, I never heard of positive psychology. And that's how it began. And I just took the certification, the coaching certification, integrated medicine, transformational mindset. And that's how I got here today.
That's awesome. One of the things that I'm inspired by and that stands out to me, both when you were talking earlier about the antidotes and kind of what they were countering, but also even when you were 22, 23 years old and you came up with your 9 ingredients, so to speak, of love, that seems to be an interesting talent or gift that you may have. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, is that something that has shown up for you regularly?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because my grandmother always told me that there were 4 grandkids for her, and she said, "Dan, you're the most loving out of all the grandchildren."
Mm,
I truly believe that we're born a certain way, and I believe that there's a reason that things happen. And this is the way that I've always been.
mm,
People would come to me and talk to me about their issues. They felt comfortable with me. Um, and I don't know if it's called, I'll be honest with you. During the dark times of my life, right, I would pray to God and I would say, "God, why did you make me this way?
mm,
Why do I have to feel everything? Why can't I just be somebody who just doesn't feel these things and I could just
sure.
go about my life and be happy?" Little did I know that back then, and there was a time, and when those situations happen, I would always look in the mirror and I would look at myself and say, "You're capable of so much more." I
Mm,
don't know how many times that I've said that to myself, but little did I know that that was probably the greatest gift that, if you believe in God or the universe or soul,
sure.
that I was given.
Mm,
Right? When I look at the situations that I've gone through in the past, I'm grateful that I went through those situations
mm,
because it's made me who I am today. which is somebody who's free and is able to understand that when you have emotions, they're not bad. They're good. That's emotions make us who we are. And one of the cornerstones of positive psychology is, some people say, oh, positive psychology, oh, they just teach you how to be positive. No, 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 no. Positive psychology teaches you how to understand that you have emotions and that they're normal. But the most important thing is not to get stuck in the emotion
Yes,
through self-regulation. So, yeah.
that's excellent. And I can totally relate to, I also consider myself a highly sensitive person. And I remember one time I was talking with the therapist that I was working with at the time, and she made the observation that rather than being given the small box of emotional crayons, I was given the big box of emotional crayons.
Yeah.
And just, but we usually, there was no coloring book to go along with that big box of, how do you use this, and
Right.
for the longest time it seemed like my emotions were the challenge that I had to overcome. And that honestly, that's true, that I did have to figure out, how do I manage my emotions? How do I relate to my emotions? How do I actually benefit from the different emotions that I have, whether they're, the classically identified as positive emotions or negative emotions? Both of the whatever emotion we're feeling can actually be productive. It's why we have our emotions, so that we can make positive changes. The problem is when we get stuck in those emotions and we spiral downwards rather than creating and doing something productive with how we're feeling.
Yeah, nobody gives us the tool chest to pull a tool, because we have more negative emotions than we do positive. It's just the way that we're, because of the fight, flight, and fear mechanism and survival, right? We have to have these built in order for us to survive. But we're not cavemen anymore, right? We don't have those dangers anymore. So, but now it's like, okay, since we're not living in the caveman days, somebody please give me a tool chest to help me deal with, some of these emotions. And that's why I created this burst your bubble emotional bubble chart, where it has 9 different emotions, and I created like sadness is one bubble, and then off the bubbles are little bubbles on how you could quickly address that particular emotion, which can be found on my website. It's free, because I just feel like it's, when I don't know if you, Steve, when you were raised, but like if my mother, like if I was like emotional, my mother would shut me down and say, oh, you're so emotional, don't act like that.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure there's tons and tons of parents who do that, without even knowing how detrimental it really is. Instead of saying, oh, I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way. Like, instead of minimalizing and trivializing someone's feelings, we need to learn to validate people's feelings.
Absolutely. I don't know, I guess my mother did do that in a way, but it was now that you bring that up, my mother would frequently let her anger out to my dad. There were some challenges in the relationship that neither one of them knew how to deal with, and neither one of them communicated well, other than blowing up. And my mom, she could really blow up at times, but it would always be through her voice. It was never, there was hardly ever any physical punishment in my family. Right. But I remember when I got mad, my mom would always try to, suppress that anger, and instead of addressing whatever it was that I was angry, it was, go to your room and punch a pillow, or, whatever. And admittedly, I had a pretty fierce anger, and my older brother, who dealt with some severe mental health issues, had an even more irate anger. And so there's, stuff ripped off the walls and holes punched in the walls and things like that. So there's a lot of energy going on there, but none of it is being managed well. It's just, let's try to shove it in a corner and forget about it and pretend it's not there, even though it's playing havoc in our family's life.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And you mentioned that you didn't have the physical punishments. Well, I did. My mother used to beat the living crap out of me. And
Mm,
that was something I had to overcome as well, when you have that physical, because back then in the 70s, it seemed like it was a normal thing to do. You know,
right.
today's society, the DIFUS is coming to knock on your door, right?
Right.
So, it's just, I just see like all those things could just really cause you to have some true deep emotional scars. And between you and me, Steve, there's still those one of the people I admire is Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you're
Mm,
familiar with Eckhart Tolle. And
yes.
he says that we each have pain bodies, right?
Mm,
And I agree with that, because if I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or I'm feeling sick, or I'm just not at my best, it's very easy for one of those pain bodies to come up and get me, right? And you gotta kind of like, those things don't go away. So it's like, it's truly important to to learn these concepts, right? To build your tool chest. So when those things happen, you're able to question your thoughts and say, hmm, what's going on really here, right? But
absolutely.
it takes practice, deliberate practice, to do that. And deliberate practice is very different from practice. Practice is, you could go out and you could shoot hoops at the foul line forever, right? With regular practice. But deliberate practice is you have a coach there, an accountability partner, to say, oh, this is how you're standing. This is what you're
Mm,
doing. This is,
mm,
to hold you accountable to shoot those 100 baskets a day, because you say, you know what, I'm going to do 50, right?
yes.
So, when it comes to my business, like when I with the Get Real Deal and Heal course, I've implemented within each module. At the end of each module, I provide a free group coaching call,
Mm,
so that way, because some courses will just say, here, take the course, and they'll leave you alone, and that's that. But I want people to really understand the concepts that they're learning. So after each module, I want them to like call me, book a call, ask questions, comments, concerns over, with the material. And the same thing goes with just coaching, like for integrative nutrition. You need an accountability partner, and it can't be something like just a month to do it,
mm,
to switch your nutrition, because it's not just about nutrition, it's also about your secondary foods, which is everything off your plate, your
mm,
relationships, all this affects everything.
mm.
So, and what that entails is an accountability partner, but it takes like 6 months. It's not something that happens like over time. Like when I mentioned about the 9 ingredients of love, that I kept reading morning and night, they'll say, oh, it takes 21 days to, make a change. That's
Mm,
not necessarily true. It depends on a person's lifestyle. It could take 4 months, depending on
sure.
what they have to uncover, right? To get out before you could let that stuff in. So, I like to make sure that, when I'm working with a client, it's at least a minimum of 6 months to help them.
That's a really good point. You make some excellent distinctions between practice and deliberate practice. And also, we have spent however many years that we've been around when we decide to make that change, and then to expect that we can correct that within. And sometimes, I mean, there are some things I'm sure that we can correct in 21 days, but in my
Right.
experience, there's also an awful lot of things that takes a whole lot longer than 21 days to correct. And one of the thoughts that comes to mind for me that I've sometimes used as an example is learning how to do like warrior three pose.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took me months to even be able to do that for like a fraction of a second, and still I'm not great at it. I couldn't hold it like some people can hold it for 45 minutes or whatever. That is far beyond what I can do. but
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
had to be consistent and keep at it, and learn how to find my balance. And I think that's true for so many areas of our life, that we have to figure out what our balance is, and do lots of like micro corrections in order to create the balance that we want to have in our lives.
Yeah, and it's, it truly is. What's that saying? Progress, not perfection. And
Mm,
we are gonna mess up, and sometimes we slip up and we revert back for a little while, but that's okay because we're human. You have the tools to get back on the horse again. And if you have a few good people in your life, to help you, get you back on track, where it's that accountability partner, right?
mm,
Even if you're done with the course and you're done with life, to have someone in your life that could be an advocate for you, for you to communicate that you're struggling at the moment. It's always good to have somebody there in your corner, and that may
absolutely.
that may be hard for some people, unfortunately, but that's what you really should try to strive for.
Absolutely. Because when we have that coach, when we have that external perspective of what's going on for us, there's so much of our existence, of our expression that that has become routine for us, that we're blind to what we're actually doing. And that's both our positive attributes as well as our challenges. But having someone, like a coach like yourself or myself to help someone along the way and to see things that they might not otherwise see can speed up that process so much and make it so much more meaningful than if we just try to do it all on our own. It's one of the things I'm trying to teach my own 20 to 29-year-old kids.
I know.
Don't try to do it all yourself. Don't do like dad did, because that's a tough way to go.
Yeah, it's hard. I have an 18-year-old who's just deciding, has to decide in a few days what college to go to, and he's going to make that decision. And from a financial perspective, what is the best thing to do? Do you want debt or do you not want debt? And
Mm,
and it's hard. It's hard, but that's the journey. It's like, it was till the age of 48 that I finally decided to go to work towards the path and the meaning and the purpose for my life, now, and try to transition from IT and into, what I want to do. Everybody has their own journey and they have to learn their lessons right on their own. And there's a saying, I have it written on my board here: you could only help those who swim towards you.
mm.
Right?
Oh, wow. That's a great example.
Yeah, you could only help those who swim towards you. So if I could help a few, then I feel great about that. I know I'm not
Mm,
going to help the world, but it's also reinforcing for me when I'm helping them. It's probably even more important. They're helping me stay on
yes,
track, because it's very easy for me to go off the rails as well. God forbid something happens, right?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Dan, this has been a very enriching conversation. I always ask my guests one question, and that is, what is your heart leading you to do today?
My heart is leading me today to truly try and do the things necessary, with the Omega business, with Holistic Wellcare Advisors and Holistic Wellcare Coach, to try to help make the world truly a better place for everyone. That's what my goal is, truly.
Mm, that's beautiful. And what is the biggest challenge that steps in the way of you fully realizing that?
Right now, for it's financial.
Mm,
It's mostly the financial need of getting the finances to launch the things that I want to launch, which that's what I'm in the process of doing now, which is speaking to angel investors and getting website designs up and doing those type of things in order to move things along. Otherwise, I, I have a great life. My
that's
life is
awesome.
great. So, I want to thank you, Steve, for giving me this opportunity. I think you have a great concept, Heroes in the Heart. I think it's awesome. I think you're making the world a better place, and I want to acknowledge, that you're a truly great soul. So thank you for creating this and allowing me to participate on your
A-
show.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So in conclusion, how can our listening audience reach out to you and benefit from the resources and the inspiration that you have to share?
They could go to holisticwellcare.coach. I have plenty of things on there, like I mentioned earlier. If you're interested in integrated nutrition, the Get Real Deal and Heal course is part of that for free. I have the Get Real Deal Heal course as well. If you're listeners, like I had mentioned to you, Steve, I will give whoever's interested, I'll give, your listeners who are interested, they reach out to you, they need to provide you their email address. I will give them the course for free. So that way they could take advantage of that. And also there's the Burst Your Bubble emotional bubble chart, which is for free as well. If anyone is interested in who is a practitioner, such as a psychologist, a therapist, a chiropractor, a massage person, a yoga instructor, I'll be launching Holistic Wellcare Advisors with an E, advisors.com, which will be a repository for professionals who could purchase a subscription where people could come and find a holistic route for them to work with you if you want to host on the website. And lastly, I have the Omega, exclusive care for the everyday man, which, I'm currently raising funds for online and offline services. So you could go to yomenga.com to check that out as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dan. This has been a really rich conversation. And thank you for being a hero of the heart.
Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate it.
And in conclusion, for our audience, until our stories meet again, be the bright light in someone's dark